guys, welcome to Telling the Told and Untold. My name is Tshego. Before we go straight into today's case, I do have a couple of content warnings for you guys. In this video, we do talk about child abuse, sexual assault, sex trafficking, suicide, as well as CP. It also goes without saying that this is an anti-LGBTQ plus discrimination channel. So if that's not something you think you're interested in watching, then this video probably isn't for you. So maybe you can go watch some of my other videos or just wait for my next upload. To understand more about this case, it is important for us to discuss consent and what it means in South Africa, as well as CP. In South Africa, the age of consent is 16 years old. But if you are a minor between the ages of 12 to 15 years old, you can consent if the age gap is 2 years or less. So if you're 12 years old and you have sexual intercourse with someone who is 14 years old, legally that is consensual. However, if you are 12 years old and you have sexual intercourse with someone who is 15 years old, then that would not be consensual because the age gap is not 2 years or less. Sexual activity with children under the age of 12 years old is considered statutory R-word, and this is because they are deemed as not being able to consent. CP, on the other hand, is considered CP regardless of your age of consent if you are under the age of 18 years old. So, for example, if you are 17 years old and you decide to send a nude picture of yourself to your partner or anything like that, it would be considered CP because you are under the age of 18. Now that we got that under the way, let's start. Gerhard Ackerman was born in 1969 and he had a normal childhood as far as everyone could tell. There were no reports of abuse in his home. His father was a good, outstanding member of the community. He was in the Air Force and thereafter decided to open his own construction company. And Gerhard's mother was a house manager, and I'm not too sure if she did anything else, but that's what she did primarily. Once Gerhard finished with high school, he took a gap year, and after this he went to go do his compulsory military service. Again, this was during apartheid and it was compulsory for him to do this. He would serve in the military for 18 months as a medic, and once he was done with this, he decided to go to Pretoria to a technikon to study film, but he only lasted about 1 year, and then he decided to leave this and decided to move to Cape Town, where he started a car radio sound shop store for about 2 years, and it said that this shop was successful. However, he then decided to move back home, and Gerhard was also described as a very nice, loyal guy who had no issues. Gerhard claims that about once or twice in his childhood he had been involved with girls. In primary school, he does remember being in a relationship with a girl, and from a very young age, Gerhard had also started experimenting sexually. He also claims that whilst he was in primary school, he did have a sort of sexual experience with someone of the same sex. By 2002, when Gerhard was around 33 years old, he made the final decision that he just did not want to see women anymore. That isn't who he was attracted to in any sense, and that's just what he decided. Gerhard also said that he had a type of man that he was interested in, and they're often referred to as the T word. I wouldn't be using that word because I think it can carry a lot of stereotypes, and also I don't think it is my place to use that word as a heterosexual woman. But for understanding the case and the people involved, the term is used by people in the LGBTQ plus community, more so in the gay culture, and is often used to describe a man who has kind of like a boyish appearance. They're quite slim, they don't have a lot of hair, and yeah, that's kind of what Gerhard's type was, or still is. Gerhard also believed that the age of consent should be 13 years old. In the 2000s, Gerhard then decided to relocate to Pretoria, and he still continued with doing odd jobs here and there to keep himself busy. He had started a bread service delivery, and then he started a lawn service. At some point, he was a manager for a student commune in Linwood, Pretoria, and eventually he decided to rent out a house in Menlo Park, and he claims that he was renting out this house from a famous sports star, but he wouldn't say who the person is. It was at his little house in Menlo Park where Gerhard started buying and selling second-hand cars, and he did this very well for about 2 years, but it did end up closing because of some financial issues. Even though in Gerhard's childhood it is said that there was nothing that really stuck out, in his older years there were a lot of instances that kind of showed the type of person that Gerhard really was. In 2007, a 9-year-old boy was on holiday with his family in Hartenbosch, which is in the Western Cape. So he and his cousin, who was about 2 years older than him, then decided to go to the showers. They were going to take a shower, and they were playing a little game where they would take off their trousers and kind of throw it on the pole, and this is when one of their trousers got stuck. So as they went to try and get these trousers off the pole, they saw a man walking around, and he was completely nude. And this kind of took them by surprise, because usually the men in the shower rooms wouldn't walk around completely nude. They would often have a towel around their waist. And what was also very strange about this man is that he was clearly aroused. The two boys then ran to the cousin's father, so the 9-year-old boy's uncle, and they kind of like told him what happened, and then the uncle went to go find this man, and he kind of just like told him off. And this is when the family just decided to leave this place and just like cut their holiday days short because of what happened. And then about 2 years later, in 2009, the same family with the same 9-year-old boy, who now was 11 years old, were at the same place. And again, this boy saw this guy walking around completely naked, and he just knew that it was the same person. The uncle also saw this guy, and immediately knew that it was the same person from 2007 walking around completely naked and clearly aroused. So he followed this man, and he just followed him everywhere until he eventually lost sight of him. He then got a phone call from his wife, and his wife just told him that the man had been arrested. So the uncle kind of ran to go see where this man was, and then he saw him in the back of a police van, and this man was Gerhard Ackerman. I'm not too sure what happened with this particular case after Gerhard's arrest, but not much, because by 2015, 2016, he was still renting out that house in Menlo Park, and he decided to open a massage parlor, and he would hire masseurs who were aged between 16 to 22 years old, and they were all boys. This would be his first massage parlor, but he would go on to have opened around 3 of them. In these massage parlors, their patrons would get what Gerhard would call happy endings and any other sexual favors that they requested. And this massage parlor was doing relatively well, and a lot of clients that Gerhard would get would come from the Johannesburg area, particularly in Sandton, and they would drive all the way to Pretoria. It's not that much of a distance, maybe about 40 minutes, but it was still a drive. Like, you still had to take the highway, and this kind of stood out to Gerhard, and this massage parlor would do really well for a couple of years until Gerhard got involved in a car accident, or was involved in a car accident rather, and because of this he fell behind with his finances, and because he was behind on his finances, he couldn't keep up with the rent of his home in Menlo Park, and this is when the landlord decided to basically kick him out. So now that Gerhard had no place to stay, he still really wanted to open another massage parlor. So he decided that his best option would go to Joburg and hire or rent out a house in the Sandton area, because that's where most of his clients came from. And this is exactly what Gerhard did. He moved to Joburg and he rented out a really massive house. It was quite large, that at any given time about 5 to 7 messieurs would live there. And again, they were also around the same age as the messieurs that were in Menlo Park. This time they averaged just around 16 years old, and they continued providing these massages with happy endings and all these sexual notes as well. Gerhard's second massage parlor would do well for about a year and a half, until there was one day when Gerhard went to an equating center in Morningside and approached a young boy in the change room. Either Gerhard touched the child or he forced the child to touch him, but because of this, he was then arrested. Gerhard would then spend the weekend in jail, and whilst he was in jail, police officers went to this house that he was renting in Sandton, and they saw all these messieurs there, and they basically just kicked them out of the house and told them that they had to leave. So these boys kind of took the opportunity to go through everything in the house, and they basically just took all of just stripped the house apart and took everything that they could find of value. So when Gerhard was eventually released on bail that Monday, he went home and he found that his home had nothing and all of the messieurs were gone. And this is how his second massage parlor failed. With his second massage parlor having failed, Gerhard then decided to move to Sandringham, which is still in Johannesburg. If I'm not mistaken, it's around the Linksfield area, and he just decided that he was done with the massage parlor business and he was just going to buy and sell second-hand goods. And this was his plan until he received a phone call from one of his clients, Paul Kennedy, and Paul Kennedy basically just asked Gerhard if he had a child for him or if he had any CP. And after Gerhard got this phone call from Paul, he kind of knew that people really liked the services that he provided, and this is when he decided to open up his third massage parlor in this house that he was renting or flat in Sandringham. Paul Kennedy, the client who called Gerhard Ackerman, was a well-known senior advocate and acting judge. Paul Michael Kennedy was born in Johannesburg in 1958 and he matriculated from St. David Masters College in 1974. He got his BCom and LLB degree from the University of the Witwatersrand, and he was then admitted as an advocate in 1985. At the time of this case, Paul was divorced and he had 4 children. Paul was a pillar in the legal community, and those who knew him described him as someone who was like sober, strong. He was always willing to help, especially his younger colleagues. He would sometimes give free legal advice, and he just seemed like he was always willing to help people. He was also part of the State Capture Commission as an evidence leader and fought tirelessly against corruption, and it was pretty evident that Paul Kennedy lived 2 different lives. Not only would Paul go on to use the services that Gerhard provided, but he would also help in transporting the victims as well as creating CP. And this is how Paul and Gerhard would continue for the next couple of years. And even though Gerhard had this massage parlor, he would still do a lot of other things outside that really showed who Gerhard was to the core. In August 2018, it is alleged that Gerhard sexually assaulted an 11-year-old boy in a public bathroom in an upmarket country club in Joburg. This 11-year-old boy was a hockey player, and they had a game against one of their rival schools. He started the hockey game, and right before halftime he was taken off, and he was just sitting on the field watching the game when he needed to go use the bathroom. So he got to the bathroom, and this is when he saw this man with a sling on his one arm. The 11-year-old boy kind of paid no attention to him and went to one of the urinals to just go and use the bathroom, and this is when Gerhard Ackerman approached him and kind of blocked him so he couldn't escape. He then told this boy that he needed help using the bathroom because he only had one arm. He then took out his genitalia and he forced this 11-year-old boy to touch him about 4 times, and then the 11-year-old boy managed to escape. Gerhard was arrested and pleaded not guilty to the charges, and then he was released 3 days later on bail for 5,000 rand. 5,000 rand bail. There was another instance where Gerhard went to the Morningside Country Club, and there were these young boys that had swimming lessons. Gerhard went into the change rooms, he saw them, and he revealed himself to this group of boys, and he self-pleasured, and he was then confronted by the establishment security guards, and he fled the scene, got into a white BMW and drove through the boom gate, breaking it. Police managed to track him down and he was arrested, and Gerhard was adamant that they had arrested the wrong person, but he did admit that he was there on the day. Eventually, in 2020, a 16-year-old boy would go to the police station and report Gerhard Ackerman for having R-worded him. Police officers then went to go arrest Gerhard Ackerman, and this is when they uncovered everything. This part is a bit hard to listen to, so if you do want to skip it, I will put a timestamp so you can skip, but it won't take long, maybe about like 10 seconds. But police officers found over 600 pictures of CP on Gerhard's cell phone and over 1,300 photos on his laptop, and these pictures included toddlers aged between 6 to 12, and in some of the pictures it was just their private parts. Other pictures showed them being sodomized, and other pictures showed them having genitalia in their mouths. Gerhard denied that the CP that they found belonged to him, and he said that one of the masseurs that worked at the massage parlor had uploaded it onto his phone. Gerhard also claimed that the youngest person that he had ever been sexually involved with was 23 years old when he was 50, and by the time that he was incarcerated, he was seeing a 19-year-old who was addicted to drugs. Paul Kennedy was also arrested, but at the time he couldn't be named because both he and Gerhard hadn't yet pleaded to any charges. And things regarding Gerhard Ackerman and Paul Kennedy were quiet until the media got wind of the case towards the end of 2021. And in the months that followed, Paul was under growing pressure. He was slapped with so many charges. He was reported to the Legal Practice Council, and his reputation was in ruins. So he resigned from the bar. Paul and Gerhard were a week away from appearing in the High Court on 735 counts that included sexual grooming of children, human trafficking, procuring CP, assault, sexual exploitation of children, and the R word. Gerhard claims that he helped better the lives of the young boys that he helped, and he said that they were of legal consenting age. According to him, he saved them and bettered their lives because a lot of the young boys that were masseurs were children that he found online, and he would kind of gain their trust and tell them that he had a massage parlor and he could hire them and they could earn a living. And a lot of these boys that he found on social media were boys that were going through a tough time, whether it be financially in their families, having just come out and their families having kicked them out of the house, and just things like that. So he kind of preyed on these young vulnerable boys to do what he wanted for his own sexual and financial gain. Gerhard also claimed that the boys would earn at least 300 rand per interaction and there was no penetrative sex. After having convinced the boys to work at masseurs, Gerhard would then traffic them to the brothel and then harbor them. The boys were sexually groomed and sold for sexual services to a large list of clients, including Paul Kennedy. However, Paul Kennedy is the only other person that we know of to have been involved with Gerhard Ackerman, where the police officers discovered the other clients, their names. I'm not too sure. It hasn't been said. Maybe they didn't, or if they have, they haven't made it public. There were also WhatsApp conversations between Gerhard and some of his clients that proved he had facilitated said prices and charged them to have intercourse and perform other sexual acts with these young boys. There was also a voice note where Gerhard is heard making two teenage boys available for sexual acts in return for money, and he told the client that they could pay 1,200 rand for one boy, but if they wanted both, then he would basically just give him a discount and charge him 2,000 rand. There was also another WhatsApp conversation with one of his other clients asking if he had a boy for him, and Gerhard said that he had exactly what he wanted and it would cost him 1,000 rand. In the court documents, there are also some stories of some of the victims, and none of their names have been made public yet. In the court documents, they are referred to by their initials, so the names that I will be giving you now are not their real names. The first boy is Timothy, and he met Gerhard on Facebook in 2020. Gerhard and him had just started talking on Facebook, and Gerhard told him that he had a massage parlor and he could hire Timothy as a masseur, and that there was no funny business to it. It was just massaging. And Timothy then told his dad about this opportunity, and then Timothy's dad spoke to Gerhard on the phone, and Gerhard reassured him that there was nothing to it. There were like no sexual connotations, nothing sexual would happen. It was just a massage parlor and they just provided normal massages. And because of this, Timothy's dad was kind of like eased Timothy's dad's like questions about it or any skepticism that he had surrounding this massage parlor. At the time, Timothy was 16 years old, and Gerhard had also asked him to take a video of himself self-pleasuring. Timothy then got onto a bus and made his way from the Free State to Johannesburg, and once he got to Johannesburg, Gerhard got an Uber for him, and the Uber transported him from the bus station to Gerhard's house. Once Timothy got to Gerhard's house, Gerhard then told him to lie on the massage table, and he started massaging him from his feet upwards. Gerhard also told Timothy how hot he was and told him that he had to be naked when he massaged clients and that he had to fondle the client's private parts. The clients were also allowed to touch Timothy's private parts during these massages, and Gerhard told Timothy that he had to fondle his clients' private areas until they reached their happy ending. Timothy says that he would get about 700 to 800 rand per hour that he worked, and the last client that he ever saw was Paul Kennedy. When he went to Paul's house, he was accompanied by another child who was around 15 or 16 years old, and eventually they made their way to Paul's bedroom. And once they got to Paul's bedroom, they were all nude, and then Paul pulled Timothy towards him and tried to lick his buttocks. And after that, Paul told Timothy that he could give him an extra 500 rand if he performed fellatio on him, and Timothy agreed, and he did this until Paul ejaculated. Then we have Sean. Sean was born on the 19th of December 2003, and just like Timothy, he met Gerhard on Facebook. The two of them started talking, and eventually they also exchanged videos and pictures of themselves. Gerhard also spoke to Sean about just like his life, his upbringing, and Sean basically just told Gerhard that he had to live with his father and he didn't want to go to school anymore. Sean was busy transitioning and he was on hormones, so he just was dealing with a lot at the time. And Gerhard told him about his massage and cookie business, and he told Sean that he could come and work for him and make lots of money and earn a good living. Sean told his mother about this opportunity that Gerhard had for him, and his mother was not buying it. She basically just said that it basically just sounds like a bad idea. But then Gerhard spoke to Sean's parents on the phone, and after this he basically just told Sean that his parents were messed up, but more vulgar than that. And after this, Sean made his way to Gerhard's house, and once he got to Gerhard's house, Gerhard made him undress and lie on the massage table. He then started massaging him from his ankles up to his calf area, and then to his thighs and buttocks. Gerhard then got on top of Sean and sodomized him. Afterwards, Gerhard told him that he had a client for him who would arrive at 8 p.m. and he basically told Sean that he had to give this client a happy ending. Sean didn't know this at the time, but Gerhard watched as Sean gave this client his massage and happy ending, and after this Gerhard just started acting very weird towards Sean, but eventually he would tell him that he had watched him perform on this client and told Sean that he was very beautiful and that he was jealous of what he had seen. There was another time where Gerhard had told Sean that he had to go to Paul's house, and Sean would go with someone else whose name is Jadine. I'm not too sure who Jadine is because they don't explain, they just say Jadine, but from my understanding Jadine was also one of the other messieurs. So they got into an Uber and they went to Paul's house, and once they got to Paul's house they were on the balcony, and Paul just gave them soft drinks, and after just a short conversation they then went to Paul's bedroom, and Paul undressed and he just laid on the bed, and Sean and Jadine got undressed in the bathroom. They then went to go join Paul on the bed, and all three of them were completely nude and were just touching themselves, and then Paul engaged in penetrative sex with Jadine, and then after this they left and went back to Gerhard's home. Then we have Tony. Tony, just like the other two boys, also met Gerhard on Facebook, and at the time Tony was 15 years old, and Gerhard tried to get Tony to come to Johannesburg, and even after he heard how old Tony was, he still continued speaking to him. He asked Tony to send a video of him undressing from his school uniform, and then he also asked Tony to send him pictures because he had to show his boss these pictures, because he told Tony about this opportunity, the massage parlor, how much money he would make. And Tony then spoke to his mom about this opportunity, and his mom was not for it, and his mom just basically said that you're not going there, and Tony ended up not going to Gerhard's home. Lastly, we have David. Unlike the other three boys, David met Gerhard on a dating app called Grindr, and he was 16 years old at the time. The two of them started speaking, and eventually they shared WhatsApp numbers. And once Gerhard got David's WhatsApp number, he just sent him a message telling him that he had this massage parlor and he could hire David as a masseur. David was very desperate for money, so he took this opportunity, and then Gerhard Ubered him to his house. And once David got to the house, Gerhard made him lie on the massage table completely nude, and then Gerhard started to massage him and then explained to David that he had to repeat his action on him. David then gave Gerhard his happy ending, but it didn't end there. Gerhard then climbed on top of David and tried to sodomize him, but it was so painful that David just got up and ran into the bathroom, and he called his friends to come pick him up. Once he got out of the bathroom, Gerhard was apologizing profusely, but David just didn't want to hear it, and as soon as his friend got there, he just got into his friend's car and he left, and he didn't tell his friend what had just happened to him. He just wanted to forget that it ever happened. During the trial, one of the boys was diagnosed with full-blown AIDS, and he claimed that when he was 16 years old, he was R-worded by both Gerhard Ackerman and Paul Kennedy, and because of this, he had been diagnosed with AIDS. The victim's medication had been increased, and he was advised that there was a chance of kidney failure. He was the only victim during the trial to come out and be open about his HIV status. The court also found that Gerhard had sold the sexual services of minors to Paul, even though he knew that the advocate was HIV positive. And then on the 1st of February 2022, the High Court ordered that both Gerhard and Paul be tested for HIV, and this was so that they could determine whether they should also charge them with attempted murder. Because of this, the trial was then postponed to the 28th of February, but a week before they were supposed to appear in court again, Paul Kennedy ended his own life, so he would never see his day in court. It turned out that Paul knew about his HIV status, and this was because there was a time where he was hospitalized for COVID-19, and once the results came back, it also showed that he was HIV positive, and he did message Gerhard this, and they did have these WhatsApp conversations as evidence. There was also a day during the trial where Gerhard was just sitting there and journalists were taking pictures of him, and he said, and I quote, "It's a crazy world. What if I was your son? Do I deserve to go to prison? I did not do anything wrong. What did I do wrong? Tell me." Eventually, Gerhard Ackerman was found guilty of over 700 charges, and on the 14th of August 2023, while handing down sentence, Judge Mohammed Ismail said that Gerhard was a plainly evil man who showed no remorse for the teenage victims he trafficked, groomed, and exploited sexually for his own gain. Gerhard Ackerman was given 12 life sentences for each of the R words and human trafficking counts, and he was also sentenced for all the other crimes he committed, which included sexual exploitation of minors, sexual grooming of minors, attempted murder, creating CP, exposing himself to children, and assault. In addition, Gerhard Ackerman was also sentenced to 50 years imprisonment for the hundreds of images and videos of CP found on his laptop and cell phone. And even though Paul Kennedy would never see his day in court, Gerhard Ackerman was found guilty of crimes committed by Paul through the doctrine of common purpose, and these crimes included sexual assault and the R words of 3 minors aged 14, 15 and 16, and this is because Gerhard had delivered them to Paul's house knowing that Paul was HIV positive. And even though Paul Kennedy and Gerhard Ackerman were arrested and Gerhard Ackerman found guilty and sentenced to life, there are countless of other men we do not know of. And that's it for today's case. I know it was very heavy, but thank you guys so much for watching. Please don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. It helps out my channel a lot, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.